opened the bedroom door, and there he was, my husband, lips locked with his secretary in our bed. He smiled at me like nothing happened. By the end of that night, his job, his pride, and his power were mine to destroy. They thought they could break me quietly. But I burned everything they built, and made them watch. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who smiled while stabbing your back, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and share your thoughts in the comments, because today, justice doesn't whisper, it roars. Let's begin. It was supposed to be just another Wednesday night. I had brought home Mason's favorite takeout, pad thai and spring rolls, extra spicy, just the way he liked it. The scent of chili and peanut sauce filled the hallway as I walked through the front door of our townhome in Creshville Heights, a quiet little suburb that smelled like rain and roses. But something was wrong. The lights were on upstairs, music playing softly, not our playlist, but something new. Sultry. Wrong. I climbed the staircase, my steps cautious, barely making a sound. The bedroom door was half closed. I nudged it open with my shoulder, both hands occupied with the paper bag. And there it was. Mason. My husband of 8 years. Shirt halfway off. Kissing his secretary, Kayla, in our bed. I froze. Not a scream. Not a word. Just the bag slipping from my hands and hitting the carpet with a dull thud. They didn't hear it. Too wrapped up in themselves. Too confident they wouldn't be caught. The betrayal didn't crash into me like a wave, it sliced clean, surgical. The kind of wound that doesn't bleed until later. Mason turned. His smile, the same one he used to calm me after arguments, to flirt, to soften the blow of hard truths, spread across his lips like this was some kind of joke. Alara, he said, casual, shirt still unbuttoned. It's not what it looks like. He was still smiling. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned, stepped back into the hallway, and closed the door with quiet precision. Behind it, I heard movement, panic, maybe. But I didn't wait to find out. Downstairs, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the untouched takeout. My hands trembled, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Not ever, not for him. Mason didn't just cheat on me. He humiliated me. In our home. In our sanctuary. And he didn't even flinch. That smile would haunt me, unless I buried it myself. He called my name from upstairs. I didn't answer. He descended the stairs cautiously, like a man stepping onto thin ice. I heard him enter the living room, stop, and then call again, softer. I didn't move. I stared at the wall clock above the sink, watching the second hand tick by, counting time between what was and what would be. I made tea. Jasmine. The kind I drank when I needed clarity. He eventually knocked on the kitchen doorframe. Can we talk? I looked at him. Disheveled. His shirt hastily tucked in, hair tousled, eyes desperate. But the charm was still there. That stupid confidence. No, I said quietly. Not now. Alara. I said no. He stood there, trying to read my face. But I had already put on a new mask, one he didn't recognize. Calm. Detached. Dangerous. When he finally left the room, I picked up my phone. Not to text my sister. Not to call my best friend. No. I called Mr. Alden, Mason's boss, the managing partner of the law firm where they both worked. The man who adored Mason. Who trusted him. Who promoted him over others because Mason was clean, professional, trustworthy. Mr. Alden, I said when he picked up. My voice didn't shake. I need to talk to you about Mason. And Kayla. It's urgent. There was a pause. Mrs. Quinn. Yes. I'm sorry to bring this to you, but I caught them together tonight. In our home. And I thought you'd want to know before this affects your firm. Silence. Then, do you have proof? I do. I hung up after the call ended with his tight assurance that this will be handled internally. I knew what that meant. Reputations would be at stake. Mason's pristine image would fracture. But I wasn't done. I needed him to feel the cold grip of helplessness that had wrapped around my heart. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up replaying it all in my mind, the kiss, the smile, the way he tried to talk his way out of it like it was a traffic ticket and not the implosion of our life. By morning, I had a plan. And Mason had no idea how much worse it was going to get. Mason didn't leave the house that morning. He lingered, hovering around like a dog who knew he'd torn apart something sacred and was now waiting to be punished. I didn't speak to him. I didn't even look at him. Every time he opened his mouth, I lifted a hand, not in anger, but dismissal. My silence wasn't weakness. It was control. And it terrified him more than any scream could have. He followed me into the kitchen as I brewed my second cup of coffee, leaning against the counter like we were about to have a normal marital tiff. Alara, he said, voice soft, almost rehearsed. I know how this looks, but I swear. No, I interrupted, not looking up. You don't get to explain. His mouth closed, then opened again like he wanted to argue but didn't know which version of the truth to reach for. I turned toward him, letting my eyes land directly on his, cold, steady. You kissed her. In our bed. While I was downstairs bringing you dinner. What part of that are you struggling to clarify? His shoulders sagged. He looked like a boy caught shoplifting. But the damage was far deeper than any apology could mend. It was a mistake. I messed up. No, Mason, I said, setting my coffee down gently. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. This was a decision. He flinched. I could see it. The moment reality began to unspool in his mind. The illusion of safety was gone, and he knew it. I left the room. Not angrily. Just decisively. Upstairs, I stood in the bedroom and stared at the bed, the scene of the crime. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't shattered, but because I didn't want to waste saltwater on betrayal. I took out fresh sheets and remade the bed in silence. I cleaned the pillowcases like I was scrubbing away a memory. Every corner I tucked, every crease I smoothed, it was ritual. A burial. Their intimacy would not stain this space any longer. Mason lingered in the hallway. I could hear his footsteps pacing back and forth. He didn't know what to do with my quiet. He expected rage. He wanted an emotional meltdown. He would have felt better if I threw something, screamed, sobbed. But I gave him nothing. And in that vacuum, he started to crumble. I emailed Mr. Alden the photos. I didn't say much, just a polite line. Per our conversation. I hope this brings clarity. Later that afternoon, Mason received the call. I watched from across the room as his phone lit up. He stared at the name, hesitating before answering. Hey, Mr. Alden. Everything okay? I didn't hear what was said, but I saw his expression shift, confusion, concern, then panic. He walked into the office, closed the door, but his voice rose through the cracks. I don't know what she told you, but it's not what you think. Pause. Then louder. Sir, with all due respect, this is a personal matter. It shouldn't affect my role. Another pause. I understand. The silence that followed was longer than I expected. When he emerged, he looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. He didn't meet my eyes. Just walked past me, heading upstairs. The weight of consequence had finally landed. That night, I cooked for one. I lit a candle, sat at the dining table, and ate slowly, deliberately. Mason watched me from the hallway, his figure just a shadow behind the frame. He didn't speak. He was beginning to learn the most painful lessons of all. You can't control someone who's no longer afraid to leave. You can't bargain with someone who's already made up her mind. The next morning, he found a note on the fridge. I will not be here when you get home. Do not call me. Your boxes will be waiting. I needed space, not to run, but to think. I booked a small rental near the lake, the kind of place we always said we'd stay in for our anniversary but never did because he was always too busy. I packed a bag, left without a sound. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. Mason was being dismantled, piece by piece, and he didn't even realize how much further he had to fall. At the lake house, I finally let myself fall apart. Not out of weakness. Out of strategy. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge begins with stillness, when you let the silence do the screaming for you. 3 days passed. I spent them at the lake house, alone with the wind and the occasional bird call outside the porch window. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my email. I turned my phone face down and let the world spin without me. But I wasn't hiding. I was sharpening. Every hour away from Mason made the air feel cleaner. Every breath I took without him in it brought me closer to clarity. But there was one thing, or rather, one person, I couldn't leave untouched. Kayla. She wasn't just a fling. She was a calculation. A younger woman. Ambitious. Always around him. The kind of woman who smiles too long at a married man and laughs too hard at unfunny jokes. I used to think I was being paranoid. Insecure. Small. But now I knew, I wasn't wrong. I was simply too polite to confront a snake. And snakes don't stop until they're stepped on. So I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was breathy and cautious, like she knew I might come calling. Hello. It's Alara, I said. Don't hang up. There was silence. Then a whisper. I'm so sorry. I ignored it. We're going to meet. Face to face. No running, no excuses. You owe me that much. She hesitated. Where? I named a cafe downtown. Public. Neutral. Perfect. I didn't dress for confrontation. I dressed for clarity. Black slacks, ivory blouse, no makeup but red lipstick, the kind that stains mugs and memories. When I walked in, she was already there, looking like a deer hit by headlights. Her eyes were rimmed red. Her nails nervously picked at the sleeve of her jacket. Alara, Don't, I said as I sat down. You had your turn. Now it's mine. She closed her mouth. I let the silence settle. Let her squirm. Then I leaned forward, elbows on the table. You didn't just sleep with my husband. You stole my peace. My sleep. My trust in people. You think this ends with an apology? Her lip trembled. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. It wasn't supposed to happen at all, I snapped. But you made your choice. So now I'm making mine. She blinked. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said with a smile. That's the terrifying part. I don't need anything from you. But I made sure everyone else knows what you are. Her brows knitted. What? I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. I forwarded your texts, your photos, the emails, to HR, to your boss, to his wife. Her breath caught. You're not the victim here, Kayla. You're the virus. She started to cry, soft, barely there tears, the kind meant to trigger sympathy. But I had nothing left to give. I know I messed up. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said. And you will again, if no one stops you. Consider this your intervention. She covered her mouth, her whole body shaking. People were starting to notice. She looked humiliated. Good. You climbed over another woman's marriage like it was a stepping stone, I whispered. But you forgot, stones crack. And when they do, they take you down with them. She nodded, broken. But I wasn't done. You know what the best part is? I said, standing up. I didn't have to scream. Or post online. Or fight dirty. I just told the truth. And the truth, it's already eating your world alive. I walked away without another word. By the time I got back to the lake house, my phone had exploded with messages. Kayla's boss. HR. Even an unfamiliar number, probably her husband or her sister. It didn't matter. I deleted them all. The fire had already started. I wasn't going to put it out. I poured a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the sun set. Kayla thought she could steal my life. Instead, she inherited my wrath. And now it was Mason's turn to lose something he loved, the illusion of control. Mason always believed nothing could touch him. He was charming, strategic, endlessly confident, the kind of man who assumed doors would open just because he smiled. But that morning, when his firm's board called him in for an urgent ethics meeting, I knew that smile would finally fail him. I wasn't there, of course. But I imagined every second. He would have walked in cool, calm, with that slight smirk he wore like armor. Then, slowly, as Mr. Alden handed him a printout of the emails, the photos, the message I sent with the subject line, "For internal review only," the oxygen would have drained from his lungs. The man who once controlled every conversation now couldn't explain away a single text. I imagined his voice cracking when he tried to say Kayla was just a friend, or that I was blowing things out of proportion. But the evidence was undeniable. So was the firm's zero-tolerance policy. He'd helped write it, ironically. By 11:13 a.m., my phone lit up. Mason *_, what the hell did you do? _ I didn't answer. Mason *_, you ruined me. I'm suspended indefinitely. They're reviewing everything. _ Still, I said nothing. He was unraveling, thread by thread. The fabric he'd used to wrap his entire identity, high-power attorney, flawless reputation, top-tier closer, was coming undone. And I didn't have to lift a single hand. Just a voice. Just the truth. That night, I returned home. He was there. The lights were off. He sat in the dark, on the bottom step of the staircase, elbows on knees, head in hands. When he saw me, he didn't rise. His voice came out hoarse. "You've destroyed my life." I placed my keys gently on the counter. "No, Mason. You did that. I just gave your consequences a name." He stood slowly, unsteady. "I lost my job. Kayla's gone. Everything I worked for." "You mean everything I helped you build?" I said, my voice sharp. "The reputation you polished with my silence. The lifestyle you sustained with my sacrifices." He didn't answer. "I was your foundation, Mason. And you spit on it. He stepped toward me, hands trembling. I made a mistake. No, I said, backing him into stillness. You made a choice. Multiple ones. Over and over again. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to underestimate me. His eyes shined. Whether with anger or shame, I couldn't tell. I didn't care. I've never seen you like this, he whispered. That's because you never thought I'd stop forgiving you, I replied. But here we are. He dropped into a chair, collapsing like something inside him had finally caved in. What do you want from me, Alara? I don't want anything, I said. That's what terrifies you the most. That night, I slept in the guest room. The bedroom, our bedroom, was no longer ours. I didn't want his scent on the pillows. I didn't want to lie awake and remember the way he used to brush my hair behind my ear before turning out the light. I wanted distance. Clean, cold distance. The next morning, Mason was gone. Not forever, just out of the house. No note, no text, no call. Just a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the kitchen table and his wedding ring left beside it. As if placing it there would somehow undo what he did with his hands. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked it up, walked to the sink, and dropped it down the garbage disposal. I didn't turn the switch. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and opened a document titled Division of Assets. If Mason thought losing his job was painful, he hadn't yet felt what it meant to lose the life we shared, house, cars, joint accounts. All things we built together. And all things I now had the leverage to dismantle, piece by piece. I met with a lawyer that afternoon. She asked if I was sure. I'm not looking for revenge, I said. I'm looking for freedom. The rest is just cleanup. She smiled. Then let's clean house. By evening, I'd filed. By morning, Mason would get served. And that would be the day he realized what true loss feels like. Not the loss of a job. But the loss of a woman who once would have walked through fire for him. Who now lit the match and watched it all burn. It was a quiet morning. The kind of stillness that feels heavy before something breaks. I stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into the same mug I'd bought from Mason years ago, the one that said, "World's Best Closer," in faded gold letters. I stared at it. Then I dropped it into the trash without a second thought. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:14 a.m. Right on schedule. I didn't need to peek. I knew who it was, the process server. Calmly, I opened the door and nodded. He handed me an envelope with Mason's name on it, sealed with the weight of legal finality. Thank you, I said. Good luck, he replied, like he'd seen this before, a woman standing in a doorway in her robe, holding justice in her hand. I set the envelope on the table and waited. It wasn't long. At 9:03, the front door slammed open. Alara. Mason's voice cracked through the house. What the hell is this? I stepped out of the hallway, already dressed, unshaken. It's a divorce filing. He held the papers like they burned his hands. You're actually doing this? I already did. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing before him. And maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't either. You said you needed space, he hissed. Not a damn legal ambush. I needed space to think, I said. And I realized the silence was clearer than your excuses ever were. He threw the envelope on the table. You're blowing everything up. No, Mason. You did. I'm just clearing the debris. He stormed out, slamming doors like it would change the reality outside. But I was done absorbing his tantrums. I sat down and opened my laptop to finish the financial disclosures. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something about it made me pause. There was no name. Just a single line. You don't know half of what he did to me. But you will. My heart froze. It took me a moment to realize it was Kayla. She hadn't contacted me since the cafe. I assumed she'd been too busy watching her career collapse. But this was something different. This wasn't guilt. It was a crack. A shift. I tapped back carefully. What do you mean? Her response came instantly. He promised me more than an affair. He manipulated everything. I think I was just his backup plan. You were never the only one, Alara. I stared at the screen. The words felt like acid in my stomach. Not because I was shocked, I wasn't. But because I had let myself believe I'd already uncovered the worst. How many? I texted back. I don't know, she replied. But I wasn't the first. And I wasn't the last. I sat back in my chair, the coffee growing cold beside me. For all the hurt Kayla had caused, this wasn't what I expected. She sounded broken. Exposed. Like she'd been discarded, too. She'd thought she was special, the one he risked it all for. But now she realized the truth. She was just another piece on his board. And he played all of us. That night, I sat in my bedroom, the envelope of divorce papers on the dresser, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. And I realized something terrifying. I didn't miss Mason. Not even a little. But what haunted me wasn't the love I lost, it was the time. The years I spent believing in someone who never existed. Mourning a man I never really knew. My revenge had scorched the surface of his world. But now, I saw the roots went deeper. Mason didn't just cheat. He destroyed trust like it was disposable. He built love like it was leverage. And he used it against anyone who believed in him. Including her. Including me. I picked up my phone and called Kayla. She answered, her voice brittle. Hello. I believe you, I said. And I think we need to talk again. Not as enemies. As survivors. There was a long pause. Then she whispered, okay. It was the last thing Mason expected. His wife and his mistress, the woman he betrayed and the woman he used, sitting at the same table. Not to tear each other apart. But to burn his mask to the ground. The following afternoon, we met again. Kayla and I. This time not in a cafe, not in public, but in my living room, the same room where Mason once bragged about the case he won using a gut instinct and a bottle of wine I bought him. She sat cautiously on the edge of the sofa, clutching her handbag like it might shield her from the storm we were both walking into. Her eyes were red-rimmed again, but she no longer looked like a deer. She looked like someone who had nothing left to lose. I handed her a glass of water and sat across from her, calm but wired inside. Why now? I asked. She looked down. Because you were right. He used both of us. I thought I meant something. But he stopped answering my messages the second the scandal reached HR. And now you want to tell the truth. I want him to feel small, she said. Her voice cracked. Just once. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not just as the woman who destroyed my marriage, but as a woman who had been conned, just like me. A different role in the same twisted game. She opened her phone and slid it across the coffee table. I kept everything, she said. Not out of fear. At first, it was because I liked reading his sweet messages late at night. Now, I keep them because they remind me I'm not crazy. I scrolled. Messages from Mason. We'd be perfect together if Alara weren't so emotionally exhausting. You light up my life. She just dims it. Don't worry. She'll never leave me. She's too weak to be alone. Every sentence was a knife, but not just because of what they said. Because he'd said the exact opposite to me. In our therapy sessions. In our kitchen. In the handwritten notes he left on my mirror after fights. Kayla leaned forward. He told me you were manipulative. Controlling. That you pushed him away. I believed him. I swallowed hard. He told me you were a mistake. One night. That he was ashamed. Her lips curled into something between a laugh and a sob. I guess he was just consistent in being a liar. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question I hadn't dared before. Was there anyone else? She nodded. I saw him at lunch with a paralegal once, hand on her thigh. She looked terrified. There was another woman from the finance department. Rumor was she left suddenly after something personal happened. I closed my eyes. This wasn't a marriage that broke. This was a man who had always been broken, and I'd built my life around his cracks. When I opened my eyes again, I felt calm. Because now I knew. I hadn't lost love. I'd lost an illusion. I copied the messages, the photos, the voice notes into a flash drive. Kayla helped me organize them. We didn't speak much after that. But as she stood at the door to leave, she turned back. You didn't deserve what he did to you, Alara. I nodded. Neither did you. After she left, I drove straight to my attorney's office. I dropped the flash drive on her desk like a loaded weapon. Discovery? She asked. Something better, I said. Character evidence. That evening, Mason texted. Mason *_, I heard from HR. I'm being terminated. You win. You happy now? _. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about winning. This was about truth. And when you expose someone like Mason to the truth, it spreads like wildfire. Later that night, I opened the message he'd sent me months ago, buried in my inbox. You're the only person who truly knows me, he'd written. And now, finally, I did. I knew everything. His patterns. His tactics. His victims. And most of all, I knew one thing with crystal clarity. He would never be allowed near my peace again. Because now, I had proof. I had power. And I wasn't done. The news broke 2 days later. Not on a gossip blog or some scandalous Twitter thread, no, it was worse. A quiet leak to a legal ethics board newsletter. A line buried in the third paragraph, a senior partner at Walton, Pierce & Alden has been removed following multiple internal complaints of misconduct and breach of professional boundaries with subordinate employees. No name. But everyone in the industry knew who it was. And the silence that followed. It was deafening. I didn't leak it. I didn't have to. Mason had burned too many bridges on the way up. All I did was show a few people the match he dropped. The rest? Gravity and gasoline. By the weekend, 2 other women had contacted my lawyer, both former employees at the firm. Both had signed NDAs. Both wanted out. I think I can help them, I told my attorney. She gave me a long look. Are you sure you want to keep going? I didn't hesitate. Yes. He didn't just betray me. He preyed on silence. Not this time. I spent that weekend preparing. Gathering documents. Lining up timelines. Not for a court case, for something better. Exposure. Mason had spent years building a public persona. Charity galas. Podcasts about integrity and leadership. Mentoring young female interns. It was all a costume. So I tore the costume off. I contacted a journalist I knew. Not a tabloid writer, a serious investigative reporter who specialized in workplace abuse and corruption. Off the record? She asked. Not anymore, I said. He's used silence long enough. We met. I gave her everything. The receipts. The internal complaints. The NDAs. Even Kayla agreed to speak, anonymously, but truthfully. It took 2 weeks. Then the article dropped. Behind the suit, allegations mount against Walton and Pierce Golden Boy Mason Lowell. This time, his name was in bold. My phone buzzed non-stop. Former colleagues. Neighbors. Even Mason's college roommate messaged me, I always knew something was off about him. I just never knew it went this deep. Mason, meanwhile, disappeared. No press statements. No denials. Nothing on social media. Because what could he say? He had no job. No firm. No reputation. And now, everyone he manipulated was watching him fall. But it wasn't about humiliation. Not for me. It was about truth. It was about every woman who second-guessed herself because he smiled through his lies. Everyone who felt too dramatic or too emotional because he gaslit them into silence. I wasn't just his wife. I was now his reckoning. One morning, I returned home from the gym and saw an envelope taped to my door. No stamp. No address. Just my name, written in shaky, familiar handwriting. I opened it with gloved fingers. Inside was a note. You've made your point. I hope you're proud. I have nothing left. There was no signature. But I didn't need one. I folded the note and dropped it in the trash without flinching. Because this wasn't about being proud. This was about being free. I didn't want an apology. I wanted peace. And for the first time in years, I felt it rising, not in a roar, but a quiet certainty in my bones. He was done. And I was just getting started. The leaves had started to fall when Mason showed up at my door for the last time. He didn't knock. He just stood there, hunched slightly in his old navy coat, holding a worn duffel bag like a man with nowhere else to go. His eyes were bloodshot. His face was thinner. The charming mask he wore for years, gone. I watched him from the other side of the glass, unmoved. I didn't open the door. He waited a full minute before tapping gently. Elara, he said, just loud enough for me to hear. Please. Just 5 minutes. I cracked the door. Not wide. Just enough for my voice to reach through. What do you want? I don't know anymore, he said. I've lost everything. Then you finally understand, I replied. How it feels to be gutted from the inside. He ran a hand over his face. You made sure of it. No, I said. You did. I just refused to cover your tracks. He shifted his weight. Can we talk? I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. I wasn't letting that energy inside again. We're already talking, I said flatly. Mason sighed, then looked me in the eyes for the first time in weeks. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I needed to say. I never thought you'd do this to me. Because you never thought I'd stop protecting you, I said. You counted on my loyalty. My silence. You forgot I had limits. I was broken, he whispered. And you broke me to feel less alone, I replied. But here's the thing, Mason, I survived. You didn't. He took a shaky breath. You were always the strong one. No, I corrected. I became strong because you gave me no other choice. We stood there in the chill of autumn, leaves skittering across the porch like tiny memories too light to hold. For the first time, he looked small to me. Not powerful. Not terrifying. Just a man, stripped bare. Do you hate me? He asked. I did, I admitted. I hated what you made me become. But now, I just don't care anymore. And that, Mason, is worse. He winced, and I could see the final crack. He wasn't looking for love. Or reconciliation. He was looking for a hand to pull him back from the abyss. But I wasn't that hand. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the last thing I ever expected, a tiny black velvet box. I was going to give this to you, on our anniversary, he said. He opened it. A new ring. Platinum. Elegant. Nothing like the one he originally proposed with. The diamond caught the morning sun, but it looked dim in his palm. I was planning to start over, he said. Before you found out. The cruelty of it hit like a wave. He had already planned to betray me, then buy my forgiveness with glitter and gold. I shook my head. I don't want it. Elara. Give it to the next woman, I said coldly. But this time, tell her the truth first. I turned to go inside. My hand on the doorknob, I said one last thing. I'm not your beginning anymore, Mason. I'm your end. And I closed the door. No tears. No music swelling in the background. Just quiet. And finally, closure. Later that night, I took out my journal. The one I hadn't written in for almost a year. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote 6 words at the top. He's gone. I'm still here. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge. It was power. My power. And this time, I wasn't giving it away. The first morning after the final goodbye felt unfamiliar. The bed was colder. The air quieter. But something inside me had shifted. Not healed, not yet, but realigned. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up in reaction to someone else. I wasn't bracing for Mason's mood, or adjusting to his absence. I was just, still. And it felt like peace. I made my coffee slowly. No rush. No one hovering behind me complaining that I used too much oat milk or didn't rinse the filter. The little freedom stood out like stars in the dark, brushing my teeth with the door open, dancing in the kitchen barefoot to Nina Simone, leaving books half-read in every room. This wasn't a house anymore. It was becoming mine again. I walked room to room, reclaiming space. I changed the bedroom curtains, the ones Mason hated because they let in too much light. I pulled down the photos from our trips, the posed smiles in Florence, the honeymoon in Cartagena, the beach kiss in Tulum that now felt like a lie, and boxed them up. I replaced the frames with landscapes, art I actually liked. Not things we agreed on to keep the peace. Just me. Every change was a small rebellion. A quiet revolution. I didn't need to tell the world I was okay. I was proving it to myself. But healing is a strange thing. It doesn't move in straight lines. Some days, I would catch myself staring at the spot where his shoes used to sit, or flinch when the phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. But then I'd remember, he doesn't get to take up space anymore. Not in this house. Not in my mind. Not in my future. I went back to work. My colleagues, most of whom had tiptoed around me for weeks, finally exhaled. They smiled more when I walked in. Even my boss pulled me aside one afternoon and said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You look lighter. That's what freedom does. It shows up in your face before you even notice it in your heart. One evening, after a long day, I stopped by the lakeside cafe. The same one where I first confronted Kayla. She wasn't there, but the memory of that day had softened. No longer a trigger. Just a chapter. I ordered tea and sat by the window. That's when a woman approached me, early 30s, anxious smile. Are you Alara Quinn? I nodded, cautious. I read the article, she said. I work in another firm. I left mine after something similar. You speaking up. It helped me realize I wasn't overreacting. I didn't know what to say. She looked like I had looked, tired, unsure, but brimming with something new, hope. Thank you, she whispered. For being louder than I could. After she left, I sat there with my tea, hands wrapped around the warmth, heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. It had started with heartbreak. With betrayal. With the ugliest kind of loneliness. But now, the wreckage had become a foundation. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to rise. I started writing again. I began journaling every night. Then those entries became essays. Then essays became something bigger. By late October, I submitted a piece to a women's column about emotional resilience after betrayal. It was accepted within days. I used a pseudonym, but the validation was real. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was rebuilding my voice. No longer hiding. No longer apologizing. By winter, the house had transformed. Not because I renovated it, but because I released it from its past. I no longer slept beside memories. I no longer stared at shadows. I no longer measured myself against what I used to be, a wife, a peacemaker, a shield. I was just Alara now. Unapologetically. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The day the divorce was finalized, it rained. Not the cinematic kind of rain, not a storm, not a cleansing downpour. Just a steady drizzle, cold and gray, soaking the sidewalks and making everything feel slow. But inside me, the weather was different. I felt clear. The papers arrived by courier at 9:17 a.m. A neat stack. Signed. Stamped. Legal. Final. I held them in my hands and expected something big, a rush of adrenaline, tears, maybe laughter. But instead, I just felt stillness. Like the last echo of a long, deafening noise had finally faded. I wasn't Mason's wife anymore. I wasn't the woman who got cheated on. I wasn't the one who exposed him. I was Alara. And that was finally enough. I went for a walk that afternoon, without an umbrella, letting the rain beat on my coat and curl my hair. The air tasted different. Like permission. Like a beginning. People passed by, couples, kids, old women with tiny dogs. Life didn't pause for my moment, but that made it more beautiful. Because my healing wasn't loud. It was quiet and steady, like the rhythm of the world I had rejoined. When I returned home, I dried off and lit a candle, sandalwood and rosemary. I opened my journal and wrote the words that had echoed in my bones for weeks. He lost me. I found myself. I looked around the house. Everything in it had changed. Not the walls, not the furniture, but the air. The light. The way it no longer held memories like weights. It was a home again. My home. A week later, I received an email. Subject line. Are you the Alara Quinn who wrote this? It was from a publisher. They had read my essay, the one I submitted under a fake name, and wanted to discuss a larger project. A series. Maybe even a book. You write pain like someone who has lived it, they wrote. And come out stronger. I stared at the screen, blinking back the disbelief. Once, Mason had told me I had no edge. That I was too soft to be a writer. That I took things too personally. Now, that softness was my power. My perspective was my strength. I didn't need to sharpen myself to be heard. I just needed to be honest. And brave. And done apologizing. I called the number in the email and scheduled a meeting. That night, I stood on the balcony with a glass of wine and watched the city lights shimmer below. I wasn't celebrating him being gone. I was celebrating me being whole. The woman I became wasn't born the night he betrayed me. She was born the moment I decided I was worth more than staying small. More than pretending it didn't hurt. More than cleaning up the messes he left behind. She rose from the silence. From the ashes. From the soft power of a woman who'd finally chosen herself. So when people ask me now, do you regret anything? I smile and say, no. I lost a liar. And found the truth. And that was the real beginning.